woman, and let them feel like idiots when they can't answer. Those are deprogramming questions right there. And that's why I love them, and that's why this jumped out at me as a moment. So here's the exchange with Maxine Waters. You're going to see she has no response. She answers Trump to questions that have nothing in this entire hearing has anything to do with Trump, but this woman answers everything with Trump. Everything. The man hasn't even been president for 2.5, 3 years. Doesn't matter. She doesn't know what else to say. Her programming will not allow it. And I want to just put that on display here, because even other conservative-minded videos that demonstrated or talked about this did not bring up this point. And this is the biggest point about this video.
In your opening remarks, you were talking about Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi. You know what they all have in common, right?
Trump.
Trump? North Korea, China, and Russia?
He loves Kim Jong-un.
When asked a direct question, just like Matt Walsh asking what is a woman, when they can't answer the question because it conflicts in their programming, they default back to Trump, or they'll default back to, taglines, right? They'll start talking about something totally irrelevant, like the big lie. I want to tell you, this guy's about the big lie, and it's you who loves this person. Trump loves this person. Trump this, Trump that. It's like none of this has anything to do with Trump. But if you're programmed and you can't compute, you too are deflecting onto Trump. So when she gives that answer, it makes sense to these people. It sounds powerful. They're thinking about it like, that's what I would have said. But they don't know that it's because you two are programmed.
Would you like to denounce any communist leaders?
Well, I don't know what you're asking, but let me just...
Would you like, very direct question, would you like to denounce any communist leaders? Now, if there was an issue at hand here that was not programming, she could answer that question and then try and eat up time talking about the things that she's for. But she did not. She can't. That's what I'm trying to get across. She can't even utter it in passing and be like, I denounce Mao Zedong. She can't say those words. This is why I'm trying to point out that it's more than just her trying to consciously deflect the question, whatever. She's literally incapable. Her programming will not allow her to say those words. And in this case, she literally picks up a piece of paper to reread a written statement because what she came in prepared with, because everyone knew there would be questions likely in a conversation like this that she's not programmed for.
All right, would you like to, and that's a no, you refuse to denounce that. Stalin, tens of millions died in the Bolshevik Revolution. Millions died in gulags. You want to denounce that?
I'm sorry, I don't deal with yes or no questions.
She said, no, I don't answer yes or no questions. Again, the translation here, once you see it in context, is that I cannot answer yes or no to that question. Like, I can't do it. She doesn't even know why. Like, she doesn't even, this is what a really important point to make, actually. She doesn't even know why she cannot answer that question straight up. She may want to say something like, I condemn tens of millions of murders in any situation. So yes, I condemn Mao, or yes, I condemn, Stalin. Like, I would never condone such things. She may want to say those things, but can't. Like, that's literally how this works. And this is what I'm saying when I say how wild it is.
Okay, well, why don't you explain your support
No,
of
why
Stalin?
don't you explain it?
I'm asking you the question. Do you want to
say, why don't you explain your support of Stalin? And her response was, why don't you explain it? Why don't you explain my support for Stalin?
Okay. Again, for the record, you're refusing to denounce Joseph Stalin. Let's go to Pol Pot, the killing fields of Cambodia. You want to denounce that? I'm giving you the opportunity.
Your Republican leader, Donald Trump, is...
Can you make this up, right? Watching the programming malfunction is just epic, and it's something that allows me to put this on display. Ask the question, what is a woman? and let them feel like idiots when they can't answer. Those testing. All right, I think we're good now. I appreciate that from Leslie. I appreciate that. I had no, my whole thing wigged out on me while the intro was playing, and I couldn't tell what was going on. And it was like delaying me. I was still watching the intro while you guys were Wow. Okay. So I appreciate you jumping in there. So I talked to myself for a little while. So we love about live streams without having a producer to slap you in the head or fix things or even yell at when things go bad. So let me go ahead and start from the beginning. Welcome to Wednesday Night Live here from deep in a bunker in Southern California. Um, I wanted to take today to cover the video that I recently released. We are streaming to YouTube, Rumble, was it YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and Twitch. I don't know. Again, I was mentioning I don't think there are too many on YouTube who are engaged with the program. So because YouTube just doesn't tell anyone about it. So if you do happen to catch us on YouTube and you did happen to tolerate that, yes, thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that. I see your, so Leslie, just so you know, Leslie gave me the no volume shout out and then said you got it. So I've confirmed we're good. Thanks to Leslie hooking me up. And you know, I wanted to talk today about two things. One, I wanted to talk about the video that I just released. So I released a video that was kind of lengthy, but it had to be. I felt like because one thing I don't like is when people cut videos too short because they're catering to people's lack of attention span, and they end up getting accused of taking out, you know, clipping, edit, you know, fine editing, playing with it, and all that kind of stuff. I wanted people to see the full interview, and it was Maxine Waters. I played some of it in the intro just now, but they were asking her a basic question. It was House Resolution 9 that was on the table in the House, and all it was, you can look it up. I left links to it in the Rumble channel on that video. You can. They put this out. I don't know. The only reason I could think of that they made this resolution, which all it did was say, "We, the House of Representatives, denounce communism and socialism in all its forms." And it couldn't pass. It couldn't pass. It was in suspension. It eventually did pass, but they were struggling with it. And Maxine Waters had volunteered, I guess, to come up or to be, you know, questioned and speak to this. And in the questioning, they asked her, like, you know, because they're wondering, like, what's the problem? Now, I'm guessing they put this out there to put Democrats on the record of not being able to disavow communism and Marxism, which normally I would say these are exercises in futility. But in this case, I thought it had some power. And I think the result that they got, if you know what you're looking at, was incredible. And what I tried to make the case for is that, you know, and I mentioned in the past, I've always talked about ideological subversion, you know, how it's come up through the years and how, you know, why people think the way they do now, why no one knows anything about the Constitution now, why people still call this a democracy instead of understanding it's a constitutional republic. You know, those things happen for a reason. They happen by design. They happen because civics wasn't just accidentally removed from the classroom and replaced with social studies. That there was a reason for that, right? And so just like all these opinions of America being the one in the wrong and always focusing on the bad stuff we do, like deep state, military industrial complex, all that, but like not acknowledging like the tens of millions of people who were slaughtered under the reigns of Marxism and, you know, communism, socialism. It's all in the same handbag. So they asked Maxine Waters straight out, like, "Hey, can you denounce this? Can you denounce communism?" And she couldn't, right? And the argument I was making, because if you just see it and you're not thinking this way, you think she's just deferring from the questions and she's just doing like classic political stuff and just like, you know, deflecting and not, you know, doesn't want to answer straight. Number one, why would you not be able to answer a question like that straight? Who is living in your district that you would get hurt by answering that question straight? Right. And at the same, now, mind you, Maxine Waters, as unfortunately with a large population of the country, have no idea who their local representatives are. So they, you know, she gets elected because they bus in enough people and not that many people vote. So that's how people like Nancy Pelosi, that's how Mitch McConnell gets in every 6 years. That's how all these people get in. All right, because people aren't paying attention and they don't know who their House reps are. And these people just, you know, play the game and have, you know, open their ground game. And because nobody's actively asking questions, they get in. But she's in this position and she's asked this direct question and she keeps answering with a Donald Trump response. And it was really bizarre. But what was noticeable, okay, is that it's not, and I'm going to try and give you an idea from a clip, right? So I tried to upload a clip or two, but I don't know if I got it. So give me 1 second here while I try to pull it up. But she here, let me, this is what sucks about having to produce while you're while you're in mid sentence because it's very difficult to concentrate. But I was just ripping it at, or I was just rendering it as we were on, and I think that might have been what could have been anyway. It could have been anything, but what caused my system to go a little wacky there in the intro. So where is she? Here, explaining. Demoralization is killing me right now. All right, I can't find it right now, but she. Oh wait, here it is. So what she says, okay, is that now she starts. They ask her like, well, what is your what is, you can't denounce Trump. She turns, or she you can't denounce Mao Zedong. They asked her specifically, you can't denounce Stalin, you can't denounce any of these people, and her response was kind of hilarious because now it won't upload, of course, because these are the things that happen when you go live. Um, I might have to skip her actual. Let me see. All right, I'm going to see if this one's it. If not, we're going to have to move on. But from that video clip, but she turns around. Let me see if this is it. 2.5, 3 years doesn't matter. She doesn't know what. That's not it. All right, that was a different. Anyway, he asked her directly, and he said, "You mentioned earlier in your comments." He says that about Stalin or about Xi Jinping. He says and Kim Jong Un and Putin. He goes, is there something that those three things have in common? And her response after pausing was Trump. And the room laughed at her, and she laughed because she thought it was a brilliant answer. And proof of the fact that she thought it was a brilliant answer was the media response. Now, the media responded to that, which was an answer that had nothing to do with the question. Okay, and he comes back and says, "Well, that's funny because I was thinking communism." He's like, "But all right." He's like, then he gets specific and starts getting into, can you denounce Mao? Can you denounce Pol Pot from the Cambodian massacres? Can you denounce who did he put? Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, who else did he mention? Stalin. He went through all of them. And on each one, her response was to go on a rant about Donald Trump. And what I was trying to explain to people with respect to ideological subversion is that she's unable. It's not that she's deflecting, she's unable to denounce those things. Now, because it's not in the programming. And in the video that I played Yuri Bezmenov up first, and I played him a clip from him for the simple reason that he explains like how powerful ideological subversion is. And most Americans don't understand just how powerful it is. It's very similar to mass formation. All right. Very similar, except it's more by design. And like ideological subversion is a targeted effort by an enemy state. It's whereas mass formation could be, but it could also just happen organically. Like there are scenarios where the settings could be correct for people to fall into a mass formation without there being an entity behind it to do it. But when it comes to ideological subversion, this is the product of enemy tactic. Okay, and Yuri explains it well. That's why I have that shirt in my marketplace that says, Yuri was right. And as he explains, even once demoralization is complete, which is the first phase of ideological subversion, once it's complete, the individual, now having been fully demoralized, is done. He calls them contaminated. He's like, there's nothing you can do with these. You can't get rid of them. He's like, the only way to fix a situation like that is to, where a generation gets demoralized, is to raise a new generation with the proper principles, morals, understanding, civics lessons, and American patriotism for freedom and desire for freedom that this nation knows. All right. And she's an example of what happens with the demoralized, because once they realize, and this started with the hippie generation, once they realize that you've been successfully demoralized, that they've completed that process and you were subverted, you will move up the ranks quickly. And this is how because you probably wonder to yourself, how do we get, like, how are universities this way? How did this guy get a job as a professor? How did he get it? How's he an acclaimed professor? Like, how is this economics professor who's been teaching modern monetary theory forever? How does this person move up the ranks? You would think it's impossible, but it's not, because they're hand selected. They're hand selected. And how are you, Curious Asparagus, over on Twitch? Nice to see you back again, sir. So when Maxine Waters, being one of those people who was early on selected, and they're all over, folks. It's not just like in the House; they're everywhere now. Keep in mind, right? This started in the mid '50s. The first successful generation came out in the late '60s because, as Yuri explains, it takes 15 to 20 years to fully demoralize one generation, and that's the product that they put out in the late '60s. All right, so all of these half-baked intellectuals, as Yuri calls them, were in. This was in 1984. He's like, they're all in positions of power now. And once they're inserted into positions of power, now they're in the decision-making process to find other successfully demoralized people and bring them into positions of power. Now, fast forward 40 years of this, right? Fast forward 40 years, and you've got generations of children who are calling everyone under the sun a racist, or some sort of phobic at something, and believe men can have babies, and men should be competing in women's sports. That's how fast, well, that's how slow, I should say, this process went. But Maxine Waters was indoctrinated ages ago. So when she's asked this question, she cannot denounce it. She could lie and say, I'm a capitalist, which is hilarious. She can lie and say that, but she can't devout, like, they know that they can't, they know all those years, you can't just, until Bernie Sanders, none of them admitted they were socialists. Until Bernie, not one of them admitted they were a socialist. Hillary Clinton to this day will swear she's not a socialist or Marxist, whatever. You'll never hear her publicly denounce Marxism, but she'll still call herself a capitalist. She'll call herself, we haven't had capitalism in this country in I don't know how many years. But the fact of the matter is, they're incapable of saying those words. When Maxine Waters sat in that interview, you can go back and watch the video that I put out. When she sat there in getting questioned, you could see her stop. And it's almost like she knew. It's almost like she understood that she was being set up on this question. And for those of you who watched that video, because he asked her once, I forget which one it was. I think it was Pol Pot who was responsible for the millions in Cambodia after Vietnam. I think it was him. And she looks and says, well, will you denounce Donald Trump? Which was that's like asking someone, how's the weather? And their response is yes. Like, the only person that made sense to were other people who were programmed, because they too would like to denounce those things, but can't. And when they realize they can't, they too default to Trump. Trump, January 6th, insurrectionist, the big lie. Like, those are all the fallbacks to start some random ranting argument when you're posed with a simple question like that. It's no different than Matt Walsh posing the question, what is a woman? It's a very easy question. I could answer that question for you in a variety of ways. It is, a woman is, a part of the female sex, opposite the male sex, child rearing. You can think of all these qualities, compassionate, emotional, whatever. But like, what you can't, if you're stumped and you can't answer that question, like, you're gone. You're gone. And I don't believe like Yuri does that you cannot come back from it. Like I don't believe that because I just think that no one can bring you back from it. I think once you're gone, the moment has to be yours. There has to be something like when they eat their own, right? Like when these folks eat their own, when two of their issues conflict, like like there may have been, like for women who may have been programmed that way, right? And now they're seeing all the transgender stuff and basically having their identity taken from them and losing, losing competitive edges in sports and things like that. Like all their work getting thrown away. That's the kind of thing that can wake somebody up. That to me, but me telling you, like if there's someone who's programmed watching this right now, they think that Maxine Waters' responses were brilliant. They think they were brilliant. And to that point, I want to show you what the media response was because the media saw this and just to put it in context, there were more videos than the one I'm going to show you. I picked MSNBC, but there were a lot of individual YouTubers who were also like do programmed who saw the same thing. They saw her constant answers of Trump as like brilliant. And some of them even said Maxine Waters lays a beat down on this congressman. And I was just like, I was at I understood what it was. So, but at the same time, it's not often you get to see full programming on display in that way. And when you see what I'm about to show you from MSNBC and their response to that question, all right, and you'll actually get to see that first exchange I was looking for here in this clip. So they're going to show it where she answers Trump, and then you're going to see their response. And when you see their response, understand as you're watching it, they too are involved in the same programming. So when you wonder how the media can be, how do these people, like in your head, you're like, do they have meetings where they all decide they're just going to talk all this nonsense? But it's like, no, they're programmed exactly the same way. So while there are narratives and buzzwords like the big lie, war on women, insurrectionist, QAnon conspiracy, those things are all tag names that they've been inserted. Their programming's been updated with over time, right? Trump, of course, right? When in doubt, go to Trump. Everybody will think you're brilliant. And that's what she did. So here's their response. They think it was a home run.
Oh, the House Rules Committee.
Yeah, they held a hearing
on
today.
Tuesday. Mika, what happened there?
Oh, it was on Tuesday to debate a non-binding resolution that would broadly condemn socialism.
Oh, boy. Good.
One Republican congressman tried to make a dramatic point in getting Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters to condemn authoritarian leaders. Take a look at how that worked out for him.
But Ranking Member Waters, I would think that this would be the most bipartisan bill. And the fact that this isn't passing on suspension just says everything about my friends across the aisle, that you can't condemn socialism. I mean, in your opening remarks, you were talking about Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi. You know what they all have in common, right?
Trump.
Trump? North Korea, China, and Russia?
He loves Kim Jong-un.
Yes. Where has he been for the past 6 years?
Has he been
Oh
under?
my God! That is. I mean, I'm sorry. That is like
Maxine.
slamming the ball in the basket and breaking the glass back.
Then throwing the mic down and walking away.
Then throwing the mic down so she thought this was a mic drop moment. He's making it the equivalent of breaking the glass on a dunk. I'm like, I mean, it's MSNBC, right? So it's not like we're saying, oh my God, I can't believe, that's so crazy. Because with MSNBC, it's really not that crazy, right? But at the same time, what I want people to understand, the reason why I finally put out another video that wasn't live was, number one, I wanted to test the waters with Facebook and all that and see, if it's still a heavy shadow ban, if I'm in like medium zone now. But it looks like, still slow to take off. So I think that there's still, I think there might still be some restrictions on there. But you never know with one video, because maybe I just sucked and it didn't do well. That's possible too. But because it wasn't as hardcore banned as the other ones were when I slowed down creating them. But in the end, you see how the media reacts, and what I'm trying to get across to people is not, oh, how could they react that way, and kind of, I want people to understand that they believe that when they watch that questioning, their mind was going there too, because they can't denounce it either. And it is programming. And why is it such a big deal? Why do I even care that these people are gone, that these people's minds are gone? Why do I care? Because this is what's going on in our schools now, and it's getting ramped up. And I don't want to throw every school under the bus, because there are some good ones out there, and I know plenty of people who are good-minded people, but those people need to step up as well, because these poisonous teachers are all over the place. I mean, they're spread out throughout the country, and they're bragging about their madness. And in the end, well, they're not in Florida anymore, huh? Go DeSantis. But that being said, you know, this is what it's all about. This is the reason, right, for the CRT, or now it's, whatever, DEI, and they're going to keep changing the acronyms to keep parents chasing, so they could, like, once DEI gets well known, they'll change it to something else so they could tell parents, no, we don't teach DEI, which is the same thing, by the way, as CRT, as critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion. These are all the same thing. Like, whenever you hear the word equity and anywhere in your child's curriculum, that class is socialist. Like, the word is not an accident. It's equal outcomes. They're telling us what it is. And what they want is, they want your kid, they want to normalize all of their madness into your children. That's what they want to do. Because why do they want to do that? So that your children stay in their own box. Because as long as your children are in their own box, when they get older, they can be triggered by these folks at will. So when something goes on that would otherwise be a big news story, they shake this box, shake that box, now dump them out next to each other, let them fight, and now the news all goes and runs to the fight. And whatever it is that they're working on and doing behind the scenes, that everyone was trying to, all the legitimate reporters were trying to report on, is gone. This is how you control a population. And it's not like, there's good news here, though. I will say that, as hard as it may be to fathom that concept, there is good news here. And the good news is, all right, is that we haven't fallen yet. Now, when you look at the other nations that have fallen, they fell quick. There's no 50 years. There's no, 60, 70 years to take down the country, and they still haven't taken us down. I mean, we definitely, are a hot mess right now, but they haven't taken us down. And no matter how many, times no matter how many attempts they take, I mean, how many shots have they taken at the Second Amendment? And every one of them, even in California courts, gets shot down. I mean, there's an element here, where the Constitution, despite being under an absolute all-out assault, has survived very well, has done quite the job in staying on, in protecting us. Right? How hard are they going after free speech? Look how fast Valenzuela fell. Like, they went from one of the most robust economies in the world to eating their own pets, which is real, by the way. Like, and in their fall into this mess, they went from that great state into that crap state in a matter of like 5 or 6 years. Here we are at year 50, and they still haven't fully, they're close. They're a hell of a lot. We can all see it now. It's much clearer thanks to 2020, which, once that virus hit, they completely capitalized on that event. But what that virus hitting did is, it also opened our eyes. It also brought us to a place where we started to see our children were now being educated at home, and we started to see what was going on in the classrooms. What was the result of that? A tripling of school board expulsions and recalls from year to year. You can look that up on Ballotpedia. There was a tripling. It went from like 30, which was, every year was like 25, 30 across the country. That went up to like 92. That went up to like 92 after parents took a peek into the classroom. And that onslaught has never stopped till today. Parents are looking at the content. Yuri says we got to raise a generation the right way, right? Without raising them with all this doctrinated stuff. Raise them to love America. Teach them the Constitution. Teach them, like, get mad at them if they call this a democracy, right? If your children ever say we live in a democracy, you need to immediately, don't get mad at them, but immediately correct them. Like let them know that that's not okay. It's not the same thing. As a matter of fact, it's so not the same thing that our founders were very particular about ensuring that they did not create a democracy, because they always end in tyranny. And we are at a place now where generation after generation, people have become so comfortable calling the United States a democracy that it's like nothing. Like when you correct them on it, they're like, well, yeah, you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean. Like I do not know what you mean, because I know what you said and it was dead wrong. You may as well say we live in a dictatorship, because it's about as much a dictatorship as it is a democracy. And that's just real talk. That's just real talk. I'm going to take a look at some of the comments, and I want to get into, and I want to hear your comments on this for sure. I know this went off. Usually I do throw out some more comments. It looks like Twitch is giving us all the comment love here. So Rumble, the guys on Rumble, I cannot put your comments on screen. So you may be used to that from being Rumble watchers. But that being said, I will shout out your comments. I have you open on my screen over here. So if there are comments that hit the live chat in Rumble, I will discuss them on air. All right. That's what Wednesday nights are all about. All right, is that the engagement. So some weeks I can't get to it because there's so many comments. Other weeks everybody's staying quiet. But whenever I get someone on Twitch, though, they're always active. So here's one. When Marxism comes, I'm quitting my job and living off all the free stuff. Curious, when Marxism comes, you ain't gonna have a choice. Because in the end, these folks want to control it all, right? And it all goes back to Xi Jinping right now. It all goes back to him. For a while, I was all about the WEF. I was all about trying to expose Klaus Schwab and all that, until it occurred to me. And really, what kind of put me over the top. So, I've been trying to put that connection together forever. And then I watched that documentary. I featured it last week, I believe, as the intro video. I clipped like 10 minutes of it. It's like a two hour documentary on the Epoch Times. Joshua Phillip, who you should know by now, is one of my favorite investigative journalists. He's the guy who busted out the Wuhan lab theory with a full-blown, well-done documentary in April of 2020. So if you think, and it took the rest of the world 8 months to catch up with him. Everything, of course, was banned as soon as he put it out there. But the Epoch Times, I've tested them over and over and over again, especially when it comes to the CCP, but on any issue, are amazing. And they explain the 100-Year War, and when China, the CCP's 100-Year War, which they're documented as beginning in 1949 with their inception, really even 1948, as they were still trying to defeat the Nationals in China. And the entire time, their mantra was, hide your strength, bide your time, because they were weak. So as they just kept quiet, they befriended the United States so they could milk us for whatever they could get. We let it happen because we thought that, wow, wouldn't it be great if China becomes a free democracy? The entire time they were in China bashing us, the entire time. And in the end, what these people want to do, all right, whoever you want to attribute it to, what they want to do, right, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So, we're going to be in a renter state. They're looking for, this is if they win, right? But we still have avenues to fight back. And that's what we have to do. But if they win, that's what's going to happen. Mike Arnold over on Facebook. Home from Bible study. What did you miss? Mike, you missed me embarrassing myself by starting off with no volume Started the show at no volume, but Leslie Penrod hooked me up and let me know, and I was able. This is what happens when you have no producer. But I talked about the Maxine Waters situation that I just put the video out on, and kind of broke down the whole brainwashing piece. And I'm still kind of talking about that. So that's kind of where I'm at. And and then we just got the comment saying, when Marxism comes, I'm gonna, I'm gonna sit back and take all the free stuff. And my point was, you don't have a choice, because they're gonna look. There is this fourth industrial revolution. If you're not familiar with it, it was a book by Klaus Schwab, and it's true. Whether the WEF, Xi Jinping, anyone else exists, technology is moving forward anyway. That's not whether they drive it or not. They're not even driving it. Their desire is just to control it. They just know it's coming and they want to be in charge of it. And that's where we need to fight. And that's where we need to make sure the government never has control of the technologies that are about to come out. If it's something that's like traffic safety or something like that, then fine. But when it comes to all of this, like the monitoring, the data mining, and all these things, like, it's our job to make sure that always remains on the free market. It's fine to have a law and have laws against criminal behavior regarding that type of data, but no, the government cannot control that data. No way. And that technology. No way. Because there needs to be an entrepreneur out there. If there's like concern about facial recognition cameras and all kinds of other, DNA readers or whatever the hell they come out with, coming forward, there needs to be an entrepreneur with the ability out there to come up with countermeasures and make those available to the public and get rich as hell by doing it. That incentive needs to remain in place. And that's real talk. That incentive needs to remain in place. There needs to be a battle between free market competitors who are with this technology. You came out with this creepy freaking piece of technology, I'm coming out with this one to defeat it, right? And let that. I'd rather have that game play out than have a totalitarian government controls all surveillance, and whatnot. That's not a place that we want to be, and we can address that with convention of states. That's absolutely in the wheelhouse of government overreach when it comes to convention of states. All of that falls under government overreach, which, for those who argue, oh, you should have specific topics, it's like, no. We need general topics. And frankly, when it comes down to the amendments, some of them need to be pretty general in sweeping in what they say, because there needs to be no ambiguity. When you look at the Constitution of the United States, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Very, very difficult to challenge that, as Marxists have learned, right? Because you can't say it any clearer than that. You just can't. I mean, they try to play with the militia language, but it's like, shall not be infringed. We're done. And so what I wanted to go over, and I, when I refreshed there because of the volume, of course, I lost the screen share that I had queued up, which I will get back right now. I wanted to go over today Madison speaking on Federalist Paper 40 regarding the idea of the convention, the original convention of the United States, having been a runaway convention. Now, you may or may not have heard this in your research travels, or even from someone who is just trying to pump that garbage into your head. All right, but understand that that's another. We just got done talking about ideological subversion. This is right in that ballpark. All right. Now, it's not there, right? It's not ideological subversion, but the concept of how they've made a certain portion of the patriotic population believe that the founders just went rogue, and that they were only there to revise, to add some amendments to the Articles of Confederation, and then all of a sudden, just decided, screw it, we're going to rewrite the whole thing. It's nonsense. And there were a handful of people who were at the time concerned, which is one of the reasons why the Federalist Papers were written, were to explain the thought process based on the commissions that they were given. And in Federalist Paper 40, Madison does that very thing. And he basically explains, and I'll go ahead and flip it up to the screen here. So this is from Avalon Law. You could just, if you just Google Federalist Paper 40, you'll find it. You'll find the actual, this is quoted text. These are from Madison's actual handwritten notes, right? But obviously I went to this because putting his handwritten notes on the screen would confuse the crap out of anyone. So what Madison is explaining here is basically, and there are other founders, by the way, who make the case that they were fully aware and believe that they were in their commissions. But Madison's one of my favorites. And the case that he makes, all right, so he says here, am I at the right section? Hold on. All right, so he says, resolved that in the opinion of Congress, it is expedient that on the second Monday of May next, a convention of delegates who shall have been appointed by the several states be held in Philadelphia for the sole and express purpose. Now, here's where other people are trying to make the argument of revising the Articles of Confederation and reporting to Congress and the several legislatures and alterations and provisions therein as shall, and agreed to in Congress, where were we at? And confirmed by the United States, render the federal constitution, now here's the key, guys, adequate to the exigencies of government and the preservation of the Union. All right. And if you, that sounds like a lot of word salad to you, what it means is create a firm national government. All right. The entire reason to call the convention in the first place, for those that are not aware, is that the Articles of Confederation were written to avoid a firm national government. They were written specifically to keep the power scattered throughout the states. The fear was centralized, and it was a legitimate fear, one they even feared when they wrote the Constitution itself, that a firm national government can be a very scary and dangerous thing if not properly checked and balanced, right? And he goes on to say, from these two acts, it appears first, he'll name 4 characteristics. First, that the object of the convention was to establish in these states a firm national government, right? 2, that this government was to be as such that would be adequate to the exigencies of government and the preservation of the Union. That 3, that these purposes were to be affected by alterations and provisions in the Articles. So the way that these 2 things had to be done, right? Just to recap those 3, one was to create a firm national government. The second was that government that we created would be adequate to the preservation of the Union. And then third, it should be done by alterations and provisions in the Articles of Confederation, right? Those are 3 points that he's making. And then he says the fourth, that the alterations and provisions to be reported to Congress and to the states in order to be agreed to by the former, confirmed by the latter, right? So agreed to by Congress and then confirmed by the states. From a comparison and fair construction of these several modes of expression, it is to be deduced the authority under which the convention acted. Now, it says they were to frame a national government adequate to the exigencies of government and of the Union. Now, he makes points in here where he says, like, you're giving us conflicting commissions here. Like you're sending the majority of us to Annapolis saying, well, we want you to amend, to revise the Articles of Confederation, and we want the end result of those revisions to be a firm national government, right? Adequate to the exigencies of government and the preservation of the Union. Well, since the Articles were written, is what he's telling everyone here, the Articles of Confederation were written to not have a firm national government. So why would we go in there? If we went in there with these conflicting challenges, clearly we're forced to make a decision at that point as to whether or not the ends are what we go after, or if it's the means that we go after. And so he says this: suppose then that the expressions defining the authority of the convention were irreconcilably at variance with each other, that the national and adequate government could not possibly, in the judgment of the convention, be affected by alterations and provisions of the Articles of Confederation, right? So suppose we're in this situation where we can't, no matter how I do this, we can't revise this and make a firm government. So what do we do? Like, let's suppose now he's saying that that's the case, which of course it is. Which part of the definition ought to have been embraced, and which one should be rejected? Was it which is more important, which is less important? Which in the end, which is the end, and which is the means? And then he shouts out to the haters and is like, let the most scrupulous expositors of delegated powers, let the most inveterate objectors against those exercised by the convention answer that question, or answer those questions. Let them declare whether it was of most importance to the happiness of the people of America that the Articles of Confederation should be disregarded and an adequate government provided and the Union preserved, or that the adequate government should be omitted and that the Articles of Confederation preserved. So let those haters decide. Do you want to keep the Articles and not have the firm national government, or would you, or you want to get rid of the Articles and have the firm national government? You cannot have both. You cannot have both. So with that being said, let me gotta catch up to where I am here. So let them declare whether the preservation of these articles was the end for securing which a reform of the government was to be introduced as the means, or whether the establishment of a government adequate to the national happiness was the end at which these articles themselves originally aimed, and which they ought, as insufficient means, to have been sacrificed. So basically, the point again he's making, you all agree that the Articles of Confederation are as it was stated back in that day, they were defective. They were not effective. They were not working, right? Shays' Rebellion was a great example of this, really the last straw that pushed the situation to go to convention. And this was, not to get too deep into it, Shay was a farmer. They were a bunch of farmers got together in debt, started an insurrection, and began to try and take over the state of Boston or the state of Massachusetts. And no one could stop them. Like, the federal government was not capable, because it was so underfunded and lacked any authority that it couldn't even interject. And so eventually the rebellion was squashed, but it put a big enough scare into everybody that they were like, all right, we got to rethink this process. We got to relook at what we're doing here and try and find a better way, to govern. And the federal government can't be completely limp. It needs to have some sort of authority. And so really, you'll hear from people when you look at a convention of states argument, right? You'll hear from people quotes, not from people. You'll hear from John Birch Society. You'll hear from Soros's Common Cause. You'll hear from Publius Hulda. You'll hear from a bunch of these doot-de-doos who are absolutely intentionally trying to mislead you on what the Constitution, on how the Constitution was formed, and have you believe that that it was not legally written, that it was an illegal document, which you can't believe in the Constitution and believe that it was illegally formatted. Like, it just doesn't, the two things just don't jive. But this is what they're trying to sell to people to scare them, because how do they apply this to Article 5? Well, they're saying if this was a runaway, if they just gave these delegates the authority to go and just add some amendments, and they went and wrote a whole new constitution, then if we hold any convention ever, it's going to end up in a new constitution. When the reality of the matter is, this isn't even a constitutional convention that we're trying to get called. It's not even. It's a constitution for proposing amendments. And those amendments need to be on the same subject matter. How do we know this? Because if they didn't, we'd be having conventions every day. There are hundreds of applications for convention of states that span a litany of topics all over the spectrum. And none of them are going anywhere, except the one we have right now that addresses today's issues in term limits for all government officials, government overreach to deal with these regulatory agencies, shut down the Board of Education, etc., move all that power to the states, and then lastly, fiscal restraints to get our dollar back. If there's any of those three things that you think the federal government will do right now on their own, if you think that we can elect Trump and he'll go in and he'll do this, you're crazy. There's no Superman. Like, you're not solving the issues at hand today, whether it be the deep state or whatever it may be. You're not solving those issues today without because the reality of the matter is almost all of those issues, almost all issues in this nation that derive around government power and the government having too much power, or however you want to visualize that, almost all of them come from Supreme Court decisions scattered over 100 years that have just expanded authority of the federal government to a place where it's almost unrecognizable. The 3,000 page, behemoth of a constitution that includes the annotated version that they all use, that includes all of the Supreme Court decisions, that piece of work right there is what they go off of. And all of those, it's that constitution that could use a few pages ripped out. And none of them will be pages that are on the original Constitution that most loyal patriots keep in their back pocket. It's those court decisions. And there's no way, as long as the federal government has those court decisions to refer to, then they have authority. But our founders and the brilliance that they displayed understood this concept and said, hey, while we're doing this, because they were afraid of the firm national government that they were commissioned to create, many of them were anyway. People like John Adams, would probably like to see it be, even more. I mean, he wanted Washington called Your Highness. But the reality of the matter is, those pages and those court decisions are what give this government power. And there is a way, but there's only one way in our Constitution to overturn that, to fix that. The Supreme Court, they're teaching kids now that the Supreme Court is the final word in this country. It is not the final word. We, the people, are the final word. And if the courts make a bad decision, you can clarify that by amending the Constitution that we think that was a bad decision. And while the courts may not be directly accountable to us, they are directly accountable to the Constitution. This is how the country works. This is why we're not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. When the Democrats or the left, really, the progressives, whatever the hell you want to call them, when they wanted income taxes imposed, the courts kept shooting them down. So what did they do? Decades it took them, but they waited, and they got the right climate, and they squeezed in the 16th Amendment and then realized, which allowed for income tax. And then once they realized they had the good climate, they were like, why stop now? Let's take away power from the states to appoint senators as well. Let's make those directly elected by the people. Let's just take more state power away. And bang, bang. We got two junk amendments that still litter the Constitution to this day. And now everybody just accepts them like they're okay. They're not okay. They're a freaking problem. And it needs to be cleaned up. If we're gonna get our fiscal house in order, okay, income tax cannot be how we collect revenue. It just can't be. Number one, no matter how much you tax the rich, take all their money, tax them 100%. It's not going to maintain the infrastructure of this nation. It's just not going to do it. And you'll be out of money with no innovation and no new wealth, and it all falls apart. That needs to go. All right. But I could go on about different ones that I want. But right now, I'll just settle for a balanced budget amendment. And really, I'll settle for whatever we can get ratified because in the end, all right, even if a lot of the amendments we're hoping for don't come to fruition, just finishing this process is immensely powerful. It is immensely powerful. Like, I can't tell you how powerful that is. Just finishing the process. Because if we finish this process, now the relationship between federal government and the people will forever be changed. Forever. Even if all the amendments proposed do not get ratified, the game is still on. The game is, and I know some of them will, but the game will still be on. Instead of us waking up every day asking ourselves, wow, I can't believe that happened. Wow, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to fix that? Man, we can't, this deep state is powerful. Man, this and that. Instead of freaking walking around with our heads down and getting mad about everything, it'll be the federal government. Every time they make a decision, they'll be like testing the waters, like, what do the people think? Right? They'll be tested. They'll be like, well, what about those convention of states people? Because the millions, there are already 5 million or so. But when that number grows to 10 million, 15, 20, 30, 40 million, when it grows to powerhouses in each local district, and those powerhouses start throwing their hands up going, wait a minute, what's going on the border here? We don't like what's going on the border here. It's your obligation, federal government, to handle this border situation. What are you doing about it? Because we don't see anything happening. And if they continue to blow you off the way they're blowing us off now, well, then it's like, you know what? Maybe you guys can't handle that responsibility. And the mere threat of calling a convention to bring that power to the states will get them moving. I guarantee you, the second the first state jumps on board, and any one of the border states will jump on board. When all the border states started off and get it going, I guarantee you there's National Guard there. I guarantee you there's a wall built, probably a freaking electrified wall with sound barriers and all kinds of high-tech stuff, drones, everything. And that problem will be solved. And we don't even have to call the convention for that. Because we've called it, and we called BS on JBS, John Birch Society, and we called BS on Publius Hulda and Soros's groups, because we shot down their fear-mongering argument, and it is no longer on the table. Now we could get to the people's business. Now we can get to the people's business. And get to it directly. It doesn't have to be, my guy lost in the election this year, so now we got to wait 4 years to get any change. And even if you waited, you're not getting this kind of change. You want to save the dollar? You like your money? You want your children to grow up in a world like that? You want your children to grow up in a world where Xi Jinping is manipulating everything that goes on in society? Is that what you want to grow up in? You want your kids to grow up in? Your grandchildren? Your first action needs to be, take a look at who your state representative is, local, not who represents you in the congressional Senate, who represents you in your state Senate, who represents you in your state legislature period, in the House, Senate, if you're in Nebraska, the one chamber, whatever they call it. Know who these representatives are. This is how the federal government is designed to work. It is not designed to work. The federal government was created by the states, not the other way around. The power belongs to the states, not even in governors. The power belongs to the state legislatures. When it comes down to it, the founders specifically gave that authority to them, including selecting senators for the federal Congress. Why? You might think, well, maybe we'd be better off if everybody elects their senator directly. Why would they set it up where they're appointed? Why? Because when you get a Mitt Romney or a Liz Cheney who act like a freaking doo-doo, and you can't even freaking recognize them as a conservative or to any values that you elected, whatever side you're on, whoever your congressperson is in the Senate, if they start acting in a way that has nothing to do with the way you voted and the reason you voted them in, you have recourse. Now you can go to your state legislature and be like, hey, go to your local representative, start making a stink. If they're making a big enough problem and enough people go to their legislatures and be like, look, you get rid of him or we get rid of you. Well, then the legislature would turn around and remove Mitt Romney and remove Liz Cheney and put in somebody else. And if they're lucky, we'll like that person and they won't have to pull him again. That's how it's designed to work. Sorry, I'm trying to see something here. Rumble people, let's hear your feedback. I want to hear what you guys think about this. It's important that people understand this nonsense because, like we were talking about Maxine Waters earlier, a good portion of when I say good portion, I'm not talking half the country. It's a good 25 to 30% who are all in, like Maxine Waters is. But the problem is that the elites and the powers that be are going to take from that 30% when they put people in power positions. This is how the world goes mad. This is how it happens. And it's something that we need to be aware of. Right now, I don't think a lot of people understand this. I really don't. Because there's been no civics, look, even civics, I had to go learn on my own. I learned civics because I was curious. School system had zero, and I went to private schools. School system had zero, well, at least through high school. No, actually through college too. And honestly, they had zero input on what I understand about the federal government today. There was one professor in my senior year of college that actually did an American history of American government. And that was the first time that I ever got turned on to civics, and it was an elective. Like, I didn't have to take that class, and I was already in my 20s. Where I got to learn things that I should have learned when I was freaking 15, 13, 12. We're all in that boat. We're all in this boat together. None of us got the proper exposure, which sucks, but we're not victims. We just need to know what the problem is and fix it. That's the whole point, is that we just need to understand the problem and fix it. When I learned about Article 5, I didn't know anything about the intricacies of a convention of states. And I too, I went and I looked and I read and I said, okay, as I always do, I said, this sounds pretty amazing. But then I was like, all right, what's the catch? What's the other side of this argument? And that led me to find the works of Publius Hulda and the works of the John Birch Society. And the John Birch Societies can be convincing if you don't know any better. Wow, this organization's been around since the 60s or whatever the hell it's been, how long they've been, or 50s, I think it was. And it's like, when you go and you follow like that organization's history, number one, they were advocating for a convention of states in their earlier years. They were and ironically enough, they called them Liberty Amendments. That's hilarious. But then, on top of that, as they go on, now they pose themselves to be this uber constitutional, organization. They're a cult. They're a cult. And in the end, they're easy to get sucked into because you don't think they're a cult. But when you start to look at the way they operate, when you look at their history, the way that their indoctrination papers were written, and Kenneth Quinn does a good job on this. He's got one of his videos, I forget the title of it, All Things Article 5. He goes to work on the John Birch Society. Like, he used to be a part of the John Birch Society. He goes to work on the John Birch Society. And good for him. But there were things in there that he taught me that my research didn't even pull up. I mean, this dude gets it. He understands it. And he's in the Convention of States fight too. He's a part of U.S. term limits. Like his cause really, but he shows up at cause legislative events for the cause resolutions too, because he wants to get it all done. He just thinks that, if we do term limits only, it'd be easier. But I'm like, if we're going to go through all this trouble, let's just get this done. Nobody disagrees. Look at the stats on the people. So people were polled on what they think about convention of states topics, the term limits, fiscal restraints, and government overreach, right? So when polled on that, all right, here's what they here's what they showed. So you can see in this graphic, all right. Now, to me, I look at this and I say the Democrats jump out to me here. Independents and Republicans, I expect to be, to be in line with the Constitution. The Democrats, though, are interesting because if you follow my channel, you always hear me say that it's always 30%. And I get that number of the indoctrinated. And I get that number from the classic Solomon Asch study and all of the replications of that study, and then all the mass formation studies. They all come down to about somewhere in the ballpark of 30%. They vary, of course, from study to study, but they all fall in the ballpark of 30% who are indoctrinated, another 40% who know that everything's BS, but they go along with it just to go along with it to conform, and then another 30% who are like me, starting YouTube and Facebook and Rumble channels so I could go scream about this stuff and go absolutely crazy. All right? But you look at this stat, and what I see here is that 74.4% of Democrats do not oppose the topics, the fiscal restraints, limited federal power, and set term limits. Of Democrats, folks, okay? These are issues, like we're so busy letting them shake our boxes that we don't even realize like what it is that's important. Like we're so busy, letting them trigger us with and I don't want to say it's minutia because some of the stuff's really serious. Like the stuff that's going on in schools is serious, but you know what? It's not those are issues we could fix locally. Those are issues that we can fix in our own neighborhoods. We can fix on our own. The ones that we need, like those are individual localized issues, right? Yeah, they're nationwide, but they can be fixed by each locality. Whereas like Florida is not dealing with that garbage right now. Like they don't have those problems anymore. Those problems, they solved their problems. Other states still need to work on those problems. If you live in a lost state like I do in the People's Republic of California, it's going to take a lot longer for you to be able to get that done. But at the same time, you can still fight it. You can still be at your Board of Education getting people removed, lighting the flames of freedom, like screaming liberty at every corner, making sure, maybe start a program to teach the youth in your area about the Constitution and why we're not a democracy and how they sound ignorant if they ever call this country a democracy. Those are things that we can do as patriots, right? But the things on the higher level, like term limits, right? To make sure that the Mitch McConnells of the world and these people who have amassed immense power by just growing networks of friggin' lobbyists and everything else over the course of friggin' decades, that they don't grow into those monsters. And as far as going out and spending, signing trillions of dollars in deficit spending while we're dealing with record inflation. Like those things are not acceptable, but those things are not going to get dealt. There's only one way that those things can change. But you think about the trickle down impact of changing that. And it is massive. It's massive. Look, forget the dollar not being backed by gold. Okay. Nobody's dollar is backed by gold. So it's a level playing field. And the idea China may be stacking gold, but they ain't backing their currency with it. That I can guarantee you. How do I know this? Because they need control. And backing their dollar with gold does not increase your amount of control over the digital yuan. It just doesn't. What China will do with that gold is say, look how much gold we have. We're a secure country. Come to us. That's what they will do when they amass enough gold and decide to try and make a play. They're not going to back their digital currency coin for coin with that value in gold. It's not going to happen. Anyone who thinks it is, maybe it's your first time being lied to and dragged through the propaganda machine. This is one of those common sense freaking things where there's no prayer of China trying to back its dollar with gold. It will never happen. They're not going to be limited to the market forces of gold. What happens if the United States then goes ahead and decides, you know what? We're going to call the convention. We do pass amendments. We force the government to balance its budget. And then a year, maybe 2 years later, for the first time in the history of the United States, the debt clock stops or, God willing, moves backward a notch. The day that happens, it's over for any currency that thinks it's the number one currency on the planet. It will instantaneously, almost instantaneously, be over. Because no country wants openly to do business with China. No one is trying to align their economy with a dictator. It's just not, that's the reason we've lasted this long. But with this Biden stuff, and it's not just Biden, by the way, hundreds of sanctions a year are issued by the United States. Per president are issued by the United States over the course of decades. And what the world is sick of is our ability to use our fiat currency to crush enemies. Now, they're going to get a lot of that with China. They don't realize it yet, but they know that kind of, I guess. That's why they prefer not to do it. But as long as the United States government is equally as corrupt and psycho, it's the kind of thing now where it's like, well, no matter where I go, right? I got the U.S. who will weaponize it against me, or I'll have China who will weaponize it against me. But the U.S. is spending trillions of dollars in deficit, and no one else is. So you know what? I'll pick the devil that's not spending trillions in deficit. Like, that's just real talk. What are you talking about? Cool Life, I don't know if I lost you for a little while there in the midst of it, but I went through Madison's Federalist Paper 40, the reason why the convention was not a runaway convention, and then the importance of why Article 5 is the way to save this nation, and the factual scenarios, and try to imply some real-time scenarios in that. That led to saving the dollar, which then, led to who's threatening the dollar, which brought us to China. So I hope that little summary worked out for you. But that's the breakdown. And in the end, I did say, don't fear China as much as understand the propaganda machine that they have is far-reaching and wide. Every time you hear the message, their military is this big, the new era is going to be China. Kim Iverson, I always mention this now because it freaking set me off, is that she had some do on her show that she would not say is a devout communist, who was clearly a devout communist, go out and spew the Chinese propaganda line. That, he's saying things like, well, the United States shouldn't even, we shouldn't even be looking to compete anymore. We should be looking at, how can we play nice with the new kid on the block? I'm like, play nice with what the like, if I was in a room with that dude, it'd have been like, he'd have finished that last sentence and I'd have flipped his damn chair over. Like, it was just ridiculous. That kind of stuff, that guy and that kind of stuff, this is where the programming comes in, folks. This is the whole thing that I started this off with Maxine Waters. This is where that comes in. All right. Because once you get these people programmed, you don't need to, they become self-sufficient. They go out there and they spew. They're waiting for the next piece of propaganda to come out. It's not like there's a propaganda meeting. They just throw it out there. They throw it out there on some international media outlet, and the minions just go, that 30% that I mentioned, they just go and they suck it in. They suck it in, and then they run out there and they start regurgitating it everywhere. It's nonsense. They have a population crisis going on in China right now. Their economy is a hot freaking mess. I don't care how much gold they're buying. They literally, it's not even a year or two ago that their entire real estate and housing industry collapsed. They've got half built buildings everywhere. The place is in abject chaos. Like, don't get it twisted. It's an abject chaos while they're going around, operating concentration camps for the Uyghurs, slaughtering Christians by the thousands. Like, none of this stuff will get reported in media because all of the major media corporations, right? What was it, Big Six? I think it's possibly down to Big Four now. So like with that stuff, the Big Four, or I guess Big Four, Big Six. If you know, hit it in the comments how many major corporations now own all freaking media on Earth outside this channel and a handful of others. they haven't offered me anything yet. They figured they could just squash me with shadow banning. Cool life. I'm sorry you just joined. I'm sorry. Yeah, I got you mistaken. I don't get, it's funny. They're starting to get more and more Twitch people. And normally, like, Twitch has always been, I always log in and I always stream there just because, I was like, well, what the hell? Because Twitch is generally, from what I saw anyway, a very, very liberal station. There's not a lot of political channels on there. I'm kind of walking into that network like, here I am and I don't care. And I've gotten everything from the devout Marxist to the best patriot in the world. But whenever I get multiple people on Twitch, I get confused. So it says, in my opinion, it's better we just slowly bring our dollar back to just America and not be a world currency. There's no choice now. There's no choice now. We have to remain the fiat currency. The currency now is under attack. So there's no way we're going to be allowed to slowly bring it back. And frankly, you've got a year and a half of this bizarre, maddening Ukraine situation where we're so not done overspending and blowing out interest that, and the banks, the attacks on the banks, those three banks, number 1, 2, and 3 in cryptocurrency exchange are not going down coincidentally. There's no way bank runs only happened on crypto banks. So if you don't know what that means, it's those are the banks that are the number 1, 2, and 3 in the amount of cryptocurrency that they exchange value for dollars. For sites like Coinbase and other, if you have a digital wallet or you own any cryptocurrency, that's when you do it with Coinbase, that's where Coinbase goes. They go to like First Republic or a Silicon Valley bank, one of those. And all three of them took a smash. And simultaneously, the Fed is announcing Fed Now, next this summer to roll in July, which is it's not cryptocurrency. If you've read any of that, Fed Now is basically the infrastructure. Fed Now it's like Zelle on steroids. It's going to be operating, instead of being consumers back and forth, it's going to be, businesses. So now businesses are accepting, currency through Fed Now. So instead of going through a bank like Zelle does, this is just going to go straight to the Fed. Straight through the Fed, to your bank, instead of being Zelle. So the Fed's going to have full control over, their full transparency, I should say, over every transaction made in any business that goes exclusive to Fed Now. Now, will we revolt and not use Fed Now? Maybe, but they'll probably put some heavy money incentives out there for these businesses to do it. And the businesses may decide the money incentives are more than what they were making as a business. So yeah, they're going to go with it. I mean, either way, cash is dead. With or without the WEF and all the creepy people, cash is going to be gone. That I knew was coming for a long time. I knew there'd be a day when that happened. I mean, most transactions are cashless today anyway, let's face it. Like what's beautiful about cash is the anonymity, right? That's what's beautiful about cash and having that option. And I do believe that the market will find other ways to conduct private transactions, even in a crypto world. We'll have to see, but I believe people are more creative than that. and that's that. So he says, by the way, I've heard that someone from us talked to Taiwan today, and we're working on getting them to be connected to the UN. Yeah, understand. You mean the UN or NATO? Because if they're connected to the UN, that's meaningless. If they're connected to NATO, that could start a war. So, depending on how this goes, because China runs the UN, so there's no, the UN, the WHO, the WEF, all of that links back to the CCP, all of that. So, if they're going to join there, that's actually a good one for China, I would think. We'll see how the dynamic plays out. But if the idea was that NATO was trying to bring them in, well, now you're setting the stage for World War III. Between Ukraine and you try to bring in Ukraine and you try to bring in Taiwan together, yeah, there's gonna be World War III. They're not going to allow, the CCP is not going to allow NATO troops on there. Well, they might. I mean, they're going. Let's say they're going to rattle their saber. I don't know if they have. I still don't believe that their military is capable yet. But in the end, if it is, then this would be the thing to do it. And the fact is, it's really just a war against the U.S. So it's not, Europe is all well and good, but when it gets down to it, like the blood and treasure, not all the blood and treasure. I know the UK is pretty hardcore, but I mean the majority of Europe, they don't contribute much to these fights. It's usually the United States, and in the end, how that war plays out, I don't know. But I'm not as worried about them going to the UN as I would be about potentially some other things. I am going to be getting off soon, but I will try to finish off answering some of your questions here. Not a lot of comments tonight. We've only had about 3 or 4 people with repetitive comments, but all the better for you guys, because now I get to go through. You get all the attention. So let's see. So U.S. dollar ain't going to be world currency for much longer, so it's better if we do it than just let it happen and have hyperinflation. What we should be doing is calling this damn convention. Like I don't know what it needs to take to trigger people to action, but like does anyone even care about their children's future at this point? Like, does anyone even care? Like, I just don't. Like, 5 million people is freaking peanuts to the amount of people that should be freaking coming to this movement. Like, I don't know if these people have you scared in place, if they have the population deer in headlights. Like I don't know. But how do you not want to swing back? Like, how do you not? Do you think electing Trump to office is swinging back? I mean, it's a good thing, I guess. Him, DeSantis, whatever. I'd rather that than these freaking Nazis. But like at the same time, that's not going to solve. Like the dollar's still going to crash. Like your bank account's still going to be emptied, and you'll be selling your MAGA hat at a discount just to buy freaking food. I mean, in the end, we've got to accept the realities that we're in. And when there are solutions still on the table, the idea that we let someone scare us out of them because the deep state's going to come and get us. The deep state's not coming to get freaking 320 million people. They may know what the 320 million people are doing, but they ain't coming to they ain't got a jail big enough for 320 million people. In the end, if we'd follow this process constitutionally, there's nothing the deep state or anyone else can do. There's nothing that they can do. You're thinking about all the people that they want to bribe and all the people that you need to learn your state legislatures. I understand if you live in New York or California, you got some serious corruption at the state level, Arizona. I get it. Some states are a hot mess. But in the end, the majority of the states, certainly 38 of them, are not lost like that on the state level. So in the end, if you're in one of those states, and you can see the progress of each state, we've got it on our website. Convention of States links are there for Convention of States websites. You can see the progress maps and see, where we're at and where your state is. And if you sign the petition and click the volunteer button, someone local to you will call you and tell you exactly where your district is at. Because that's how this breaks down. The local districts. It's not even state by state. You'll get a district captain in your district who calls you and tells you. Or, you know what? Maybe someone will call you and say, hey, you know what? We need a district captain in this district. And you guys could start talking. And now you're taking action. Right? Maybe you're good at sewing and they need something for an event, or maybe you're good, maybe you've got money to donate, maybe you don't have any money and you have time. Like whatever it is that you can contribute to the cause. When we bring together, millions of people in a local district, it's thousands of people. Heck, in some districts 1,000 or 500 can swing the entire district. It just depends where you are in the country and how big your district is. But at what point are we going to learn that this is where the power is? There's a part of me, like, I know that it's going to happen. I don't understand how many events like can happen before someone finally says, that's it. Like, they're literally coming after our children. They're literally coming after our children, and we still have not acted en masse. Like I'm waiting for the one event to happen where people are like, enough is enough. But it just seems like everyone's stuck in place. As soon as it's time to take action, it's like, don't do that. It's scary. Oh, I'm sorry. But then on the other side, they're like, yeah, they'll have to take me out. I don't need Article 5. I got the Second Amendment. What are you going to do with the Second Amendment? Just put it in perspective right now. When they come to your house and kick your door down and freaking drag you out, what are you going to do? You're going to blow off some shots at a guy with a bulletproof vest? And there's like 8 of them who just take you out while your neighbors stand there stunned like deer in headlights, the same way they are in taking action in Article 5? That's not the way to do this, folks. The way to do this is constitutionally. And the Constitution, as always, is on our side. It's on our side. The founders planned for this. They knew that the federal government would get this crazy. And we just need to friggin' know that. Yes, we got to educate ourselves. It has not been done for us. We could sit around and cry about how the public education system got indoctrinated and infiltrated and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is the facts are out there. Civics are still civics. Whether they took them out of a classroom or not, they haven't gone away. We have to step up and do it. And maybe your contribution is finding your voice. Maybe you're in a place like me, like in this bunker, under the sand in the People's Republic of California. So pick up a mic and a camera and go ahead and get out there and start preaching. Educate yourself on Article 5 and educate the masses. Do something. But don't just do nothing and watch everything fade to black. That's not cool. That's not cool. Cool Life says, anyone ever cared in the last 40 years? Yeah, I care right now. So yeah, someone does care, and it's me. Danny Mayer, how are you? Nice to see you back on. You missed a pretty wild rant. I got a little off the rails. A little bit. Started the show off slow. The audio wasn't working, so I don't know if I'm going to go edit that or how that's going to work. I can't clip out the middle of it, so I don't know. Maybe I'll repost a replay, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, I do want to just say thank you to everybody. I'm going to, as you saw with that last video, from time to time when I have something like that I notice that, like Maxine Waters and the fact that it was her programming on display and not her, deflecting questions, I will try to, and I see that no other network is seeing that, then I want to make sure that I put it out there, because if I'm doing this, yeah, I'm monetized on Facebook, but they don't pay me anything. So they did until they realized they were paying me. And then they were like, oh, wait a minute. I mean, you hear this guy? We just gave him $800 last month. Man, we need to end that. And then it went down to like $7.50. Then it went down to like $10. I think I'm at 45 cents right now. But whatever. I don't do this for the money anyway. But speaking of money, you can go to my store. You can leave the plug at the end. Shirts like this, shirts like the one I was wearing in the intro with Yuri. Yuri was right. You know, it's got the shot of Yuri on there, Yuri Bezmenov. You know, those types of shirts that you see me wearing on the show, Play Offense, Unity is Greater Than Diversity. Those are all available at the Etsy store, which you can find by going to www.thepatriotthinktank.com. A link will jump right out in your face saying, buy this, and then you can go ahead and do that and support the channel in the process. But on that note, where have we been at? We're at exactly the hour and a half mark right now. So on that note, I am going to take off. Got some work to do aside from this, work that actually does pay me. But I just want to leave you off with the idea that you should go to our website, www.thepatriotthinktank.com/COS. Okay. And there you're going to find the link for signing the petition, for volunteering, Cause University. Cause University, I can't stress enough. I always tell people, go read the John Birch Society stuff too, but make sure you're reading the Cause or watching the Cause University material, and then compare the two. And when you see them quoting founders and things, go and look up the context of the quote, because that is what is going to lead you to the truth. So, and because the truth is on my side, I want you to go and read the do-to-do's material and see all that stuff, because if you truly research it and you truly work it through, like the Federalist paper I read some of to you today, like, you know, it wasn't a select quote from it, like it was paragraphs. It's only a couple pages long. It's paragraphs I'm reading to you, because I want you to see the context of what he's trying to say. Like, I don't think there's any debate after listening to James Madison explain why they were all within their commission to do what they did. You know, I think that's the way. When you have the truth on your side, you do that. When you don't have the truth on your side, you don't. And so before I leave, because I got so rabid about Convention of States today, I'm going to leave you with Justice Antonin Scalia and then my outro.
All of these reasons have created this feeling, which is real and which I think has a proper basis, of powerlessness. One remedy for that, the one specifically provided in the Constitution, is this amendment process which bypasses the Congress. I would like to see that amendment process used just once at first. I don't much care what it's used for the first time. I think just having it used once will exert an enormous influence upon both the Congress and the Supreme Court, I think. I think we'll get the parameters established of how you do it, what can be done, and I think after that the Congress and the court will be...
Could not have said it better myself.
And like that,